Hello, everybody, and welcome to ShiftHappens. We are hanging out in a very actually pleasant Washington, D.C. outside right now, but today we are inside at ShiftHappens. I'm with Kevin and Miknon, and we are going to be talking about digital transformation, Bank of Hawaii, and also why we are not doing this in Hawaii, because that would have been the perfect on-location segment. But gentlemen, introduce yourselves, talk about why you're here, and what's going on.
Sure. My name's Kevin Byrne. I'm from the Bank of Hawaii, and my job is the Vice President of Enterprise Content Management at the bank. Just got out here to DC yesterday. It was a nice, long 11-hour journey. Mm-hmm. And I think it's about 7 o'clock in the morning my time right now.
Yeah, we'll round up. That sounds good.
So very excited to be here for ShiftHappens. It was I was asked to come out here and speak on behalf of Bank of Hawaii and our digital transformation efforts in the bank. It's a big deal for us, and
Sure.
We're really excited to be here.
Gotcha. And how about yourself?
My name is Miknon Go. I'm actually with AppPoint. I actually led our delivery with Bank of Hawaii. I'm with our services team. I'm one of the director and been involved from conception, pre-sales, all the way to finishing the delivery with Kevin.
Gotcha. So let's just talk about this project, gentlemen. Can you talk about what were the challenges, why this project occurred, and just kind of walk us through the journey?
Sure. We had the fortune of being on a very old version of SharePoint.
Do you want to tell us what version it was? Was it 2000?
It was less than 10, let's just put it to you like that.
Okay.
And we had the pleasure of running right up against the end-of-life deadline for that,
Yep.
so you can probably guess which version we were on. Anyway, we were in a real bind. We had a lot of content. It was a
Sure.
very well-used platform, but not a very well-governed platform. And unfortunately, we really tied our hands. And it came to the point where we were kind of getting desperate, I guess, both in terms of timeline and also looking for help.
Yeah.
Some of the major challenges. A lot of content.
Yep.
Nobody wanted to own it. Nobody wanted to care for it.
Mm-hmm.
It was given to IT in my group, and we were told to upgrade it. So fortunately, once we had shopped around a little bit, we were able to partner up with AppPoint and Miknon and to be able to drive the project to success.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I was going to say I was involved with Kevin from the very beginning, right?
Yeah.
We run our analysis, our scan tool, and we were able to help Kevin develop the business case, right? By analyzing what they currently have. It's one thing to say, hey, we need a more controlled environment, right? A more governed environment, but to actually translate that into specifics, saying, what does it actually look like?
Yeah.
How many sites do we have? Like 30-40% that someone created and never used anymore. How much does that translate to actual dollars, right?
Yep.
So that you can have a business case for this whole project. Okay, so that's
Right, and our executives, they knew it was a mess.
Yeah.
And they knew they had to do something about it, but being able to use that discovery tool and AppPoint's experience, we were able to quantify what that mess was and and build a plan for how to get out of the mess and how we would not get into that mess in the future.
Gotcha. So what did you migrate to? What did you end up with?
Well, it was a long gestating project, so we migrated to SharePoint 2013.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that from which platform, but from a previous version.
Yes.
So yeah.
So you ended up on 2013, but you feel like you're in a better spot now.
It's tremendously much better. We went from a position whereby we were very heavily reliant on IT resources to using the governance automation platform from AppPoint to automate a whole bunch of very simple SharePoint type tasks.
Sure.
Things like standing up sites or creating lists that previously folks would come to IT for and clog up our resources.
Yep.
And from about close to 1,600 sites or something like that, down to below 800 now. So clearing out all the rot and really just using folks using sites that need it.
And that's really what's interesting with the project, right? It's a lot of different components coming in, and that's really from an AppPoint standpoint. That's really the biggest value we see, right, that we can provide a holistic solution
Sure.
of the different components, right? At the core of it, there's migration, but then there's governance, and then there's the customizations involved in the intranet and collaboration side, and on top of that, right, making sure everything runs smoothly with each other, making sure there's a realistic strategy, right? Like what Kevin just said.
Yep.
There's a lot of those what we call rot data, redundant, obsolete, and trivial data that people just created sites all over the place, never needed it anymore. Instead of having just a one-time cleanup, right? We were able to do some cleanup at the beginning. But rather than go through a big exercise, because of the governance framework we put in place in the destination, we're able to migrate a lot going in there. And just by it going to the new governance framework and platform, a lot of those rot data gets cleaned up over time, right? So it's a more holistic approach to the whole thing.
Yeah, and I got to say, at the beginning, when we looked at the products and what we needed, we felt like perhaps we just needed the migration tool, and then we start talking about automation and then the compliance guardian tool. And at the beginning, I got to be honest, I was a little hesitant because do I really need all that stuff?
Sure.
But now I'm really, really glad that we have that full suite so we can look at everything from end-to-end perspective.
And that's what's interesting right now, not just with Bank of Hawaii, but a lot of our customers come to us starting with just, it's a migration project.
Yeah.
Right? But once we start helping them understand, do you have this in place? Do you have a strategy for how you want to use your new environment going forward?
Yep.
Do you have the information architecture to make sure it's in a good structure going forward?
Right.
Do you have any idea or plans on how you want to control that platform going forward, right? It quickly becomes now more than just a migration project. The customers start realizing that, we have to think about the whole thing. Right. If not, we're just going to get our old environment with all of the warts and all, move it into a nice, shiny new environment, still with the same wart and everything, right?
Yeah, and that's clearly the value of bringing in somebody who understands migrations, right? I think there's always some hesitations, like, we can do this ourselves, right? You probably started that way. It's like, we're just moving data at the end of the day. How hard can it be?
Right.
But then when you start understanding the complexities of one, not only just building a new environment, but making sure it's secure, making sure it's compliant, making sure it's robust going forward, it's helpful to have somebody who's been there before.
Absolutely.
Documents are great, tutorials are great, but they only get you so far.
Exactly. And we felt like that was a really key part of how this was going to flow, because we're a bank and we know SharePoint, but we're not SharePoint experts. So we look to bring in an expert to tell us, hey, this has worked in this occasion for this specific problem, or you could maybe tackle it this way, or this way. So.
And with our experience of actually the one developing the product, we have to implement this, whether it's governance or migration or compliance, over and over again, right? So what I tell people is, look, it's not perfect.
Right.
We've had experience, ups and downs, the good and the bad. Our value to you is we hopefully experience enough bad before that we can help you avoid those, right?
Yeah.
So that's really what we bring to the table because, again, of our product implementation knowledge and services and best practices.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting story. So now that you're in what we'll call green fields, right? You're in good. How are you going to maintain your environment going forward? Because getting there is one thing.
Yes.
But then how do you go about training? Because it's not just yourself, creating all the files and putting them in the right folders and doing all that stuff. What is your strategy now that you're post-migration to making sure that you maintain that environment?
Well, that's a great question. So above and beyond the sort of, I think it's monthly training classes that we have. We've also created a lot of self-service options for folks so that they're able to do a lot of that work themselves.
Sure.
And as a matter of fact, it's freed up our staff quite dramatically in the number of support incidents that we're pinged with, and so they're able to actually work on stuff like workflows or changing the business or changing the way processes work on SharePoint now, rather than a sort of mundane day-to-day tasks.
And that's what I try to explain to other organizations, right?
Sure.
The whole idea of sustainable adoption, sustaining the adoption over time, making sure what you have remains optimized and cleaned. It's not just an issue of training, right? That's just a one, prong approach, right? It's multi-prong approach.
Yeah.
If you have the proper structure to begin with, so that it's easy for people to understand where to find information and where to store it, right? That lessens your need for training because it's more self-evident for them. Then you put in the governance structure, self-service structure, right? The more you make that simple and self-service,
Yep.
and helping people to do it the easy way, because if not for that, there's 10 ways of doing a certain thing in SharePoint, right? Putting all of those in place really lessens the dependence on training. Now you focus on training them on the key areas they need to know, and not overload them with all this information, because everything else, you made it easy for them to use the system.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're able to do some cool stuff now that we weren't able to do before. So, for example, we have the concept of site owners and site custodians now.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
and that's really helpful. But above and beyond that, we're able to tell them things like, if folks are not using the site in the right way, we have Compliance Guardian to be able to step in and say, hey, well, somebody tried to upload some kind of information that was not appropriate for that site classification.
Yeah.
So being able to have those insights and be able to deliver that to the business owners and site owners has really been very advantageous for us.
Sure. It's back from, I wouldn't say my old IT days, but I'm probably one of the younger people here. But it was the idea if you can either pay today or pay more later.
Yes.
Right. And for people who are listening, I'm not talking necessarily about financially, right? You can just migrate and do whatever, but you can literally pay in either compliance issues, just downtime.
Yes.
Just there's so many other ways that you can end up paying for a bad migration other than financially that you have to be cognizant of.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think it was a challenge for us at the beginning to really see that in such a clear way. Now,
Sure.
They say hindsight's 20/20 vision.
No, it really is.
It really is for migration. But I can see that now, and the way I'll look at migrations in the future is much different. And I'm glad for this experience. I'm glad for AvePoint too.
Yep. And then the other part you just said is, the control and governance around it. A lot of people oftentimes think it's a skill. The more governance you have, the harder it is to use, and vice versa, right? And again, that's where we want to, with the tools that we have, and make sure you have a realistic plan. Governance really doesn't now become an overhead. It actually helps now with adoption, because it makes things simpler for people to use.
Sure, that makes sense.
For example, the compliance that Kevin talked about, instead of training everyone on what they can do and what not to do, right? You can have a simple guideline, and then supplement that with the actual technology behind the scene, to now automate a lot of those for them, so that people don't have to think anymore. The system can help them figure out you're allowed to do this or not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very, very interesting, gentlemen. This has been great.
Yeah.
If people want to find out more, what's the best way to reach you, or just to understand more about this project?
Sure. Well, they could reach me either on my LinkedIn, Kevin Byrne, BYRNE, or they can reach out over email, kevin.byrne@boh.com.
And for me, it's Miknon, miknon.go@avepoint.com.
Fantastic, gentlemen. This has been a great little lesson in migration, just of understanding the challenges and things you need to think about before you take on a project. To everybody else, thanks for tuning in, gentlemen. Thanks for taking time out of your busy days.
Thank you for
Hit
having
that
us.
subscribe button down below, and we will catch all of you right back here next time.